Today we'll be discussing what an inherent summon is, and how to determine if a card is or isn't an inherent summon, and why it matters. Welcome to the Legacy Crusaders YouTube channel. My name is Benji, and welcome to Meta Tips for Lazy Duelist, where I try to teach you how to figure things out by just reading cards if you knew a little bit more than you might know currently. If you enjoy ruling content or have questions about other topics, check out the playlists above for previous episodes of Lazy Duelist or the Ask Judge Man series where your question may have already been answered, but don't hesitate to leave a question in the comments if you want me to try and maybe make an episode about something else in the future. Additionally, if you want to ask me questions more directly, you can find a link to the Discord server down below in the description. So, an inherent summon is an unofficial game term players use to refer to monsters that are special summoned without activating a card effect. All game mechanic special summons, such as a pendulum summon, a link summon, or an Xyz summon, or a synchro summon, a contact fusion summon, all of these things are technically inherent summons. You don't activate a card in order to summon these cards. There are some other ones that are worth knowing about, like Ultimaya Zulkin, which is a special summon. It specifically says it's not a synchro summon, but it is summoned without activating a card effect. So what's important about all these kinds of cards is when a card refers to negating the special summon of a monster, such as Black Horn of Heaven or Solemn Strike, they're referring to summons of this nature. So a summon that occurs without activating a card effect. Otherwise, you'd have to negate a card effect. So like Solemn Strike can negate monster effects that activate that would special summon a monster because they're monster effects, not because they're special summon. So certain kinds of card effects are not inherent. Summons are not inherent. So cards that aren't inherent are ones that are summoned by the effect of a spell, like a ritual monster being summoned by the effect of a ritual spell, or a fusion spell, which would summon a fusion monster, or a monster effect that activates in order to special summon itself. So none of these things are considered inherent summons. So Abyss Megalo activates and pays a cost of 2 water monsters to special summon it. This is not inherent. Trickstar Korabane activates to special summon itself from the hand, and so does Immortal Phoenix Gearfried. You can tell that they activate because on the card you'll see a colon or a semicolon, which indicates a activation condition or a cost. A colon is an indication of an activation condition. A semicolon is an indicator of a cost. So most inherent summons they might have a requirement in order to summon them, but they won't have a semicolon or a colon. So the most common example of an inherent summon that occurs in the main deck, because not only does this apply to extra deck monsters, there are also monsters that inherently can be summoned from the hand or from the graveyard based on their own card text. They're almost always an effect monster. So we'll look at the most standard of all, which is Cyber Dragon. If your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card, parentheses from your hand. Those parentheses are important. If the card has parentheses on it, and it's a main deck monster, it's generally an inherent summon from the location in which is indicated inside of the parentheses. So Cyber Dragon technically has no real effect other than it has this summoning condition. Now, summoning conditions or these inherent summon abilities are considered unclassified effects unless the card can only be summoned that way. Because you can normal summon a Cyber Dragon, or summon it in some other manner, this is considered a unclassified effect. It doesn't activate. It is technically an effect, and it is relevant for certain cards that I'm going to be discussing. Another one would be Machina Fortress, which says this card can be summoned from your hand or graveyard in parentheses, and it has a cost in order to be summoned. You'll notice there's no semicolon on it. It says discard machine-type monsters whose total levels equal 8 or more. So it has a cost, but it doesn't activate to pay the cost, and it doesn't have a semicolon indicating cost. Another one would be Grapha, Dragon Lord of Darkworld. This card can be summoned from your graveyard. It says it in parentheses, by returning a Darkworld monster you control to your hand. So that effect never activates, but it is considered an effect. An example of an inherent summon that isn't a unclassified effect would be most of the Infernoid monsters. They all say they cannot be normal summoned or set. So that is like a number 1 requirement of a monster for it to not be an unclassified effect. It's not an effect at all. We would call this a summoning condition. Even though all of them are inherent summons, they're non-activated abilities to summon themselves, but this kind of card can only be summoned using this way, or must first be summoned in this way, or the types of things you'll see on cards that they aren't technically unclassified effects. And the reason that's relevant is if you have a card like Necro Valley, if we read Necro Valley, it says negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place. And that's relevant because that means, while Necro Valley's on the field, you cannot attempt to special summon a Machina Fortress from the graveyard. You cannot attempt to summon Grapha, Dragon Lord of Darkworld, from the graveyard using their unclassified effects that allow you to summon them. But you can attempt to summon Infernoid Deviati from the graveyard. Infernoid Deviati requires you to banish 3 Infernoid monsters from your graveyard or your hand in order to special summon it. So under Necro Valley, you can't banish Infernoids from the graveyard, but you can banish them from the hand. So if you have 3 Infernoids in your hand, you can banish them to special summon Deviati from the graveyard and then use its effect to destroy all spells and trap cards. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to discuss about inherent summons. If you have any additional questions about inherent summons in Yu-Gi-Oh!, make sure you ask them in the comment section. If I made a mistake, also feel free to say something there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video if you want to see more videos like this in the future, and I will see you next time.